Although that day in Oshawa, when I saw Jonathan carving out a wonderful cross-examination, I also saw an expert. And an expert is something that doesn't often come to mind to use in the typical case. And when you're in the trenches and you have limited resources, you don't always have the luxury of being able to turn to an expert. You have to learn it yourself. An expert's there for consultation. An expert's there for review. An expert can be retained in different degrees. It is important to understand the role, understand how to engage with an expert, and how to deal with things completely and properly according to the rules. Tonight we're very lucky that Enzo Carlucci, who's the Director of Dispute Consulting with Duff & Phillips, has been, Enzo Rondinelli asked him. He's been able to honor us with his presence. So he's going to come, and there's a quick PowerPoint presentation that he's going to review. If it has not yet been posted on the website, the Garage Series section of the website, it will be for your later review. And at this time, if I can call upon Enzo Carlucci, please. Thank you.
Stand, okay. No, I can do it. Good evening, everyone. I'm grateful because every time the accountant shows up to the podium, the room empties, clears. So I'm grateful and thankful for your kindness. I'm going to stand for this just because I'm going to press on the slides as I go along. And I think we're running a bit behind time, so I'll try not to go through every single one of these slides. As Paul mentioned, these are posted or should be posted tomorrow on the website. By all means, go through them. If there's any questions after today, my email and phone number are at the back. So, topic I'm going to talk to you about over the next little while is forensic experts. Who needs them? I found this to be an appropriate title because oftentimes, and not being funny, lawyers often ask, why do I need you? Why should I pay you? And so I found the title to be quite suitable for this presentation. I'm not going to be talking tonight about how to perpetrate financial crimes and how to conceal them, although I'm happy to have a cup of coffee and I can talk about all my war stories and all the various situations I've been put in to see and try to solve. The slides are really a compilation of my experience. I've been doing this for 15 years. I've given evidence in various courts across Canada and various arbitrations across Canada. So this is really my experience over the last 15 years I can share with you. I've seen in my years many times, Jonathan mentioned that experts are meant to be neutral and fair, and that is very, very true, and I thought all the points he made were bang on. I've seen many instances where, forensics experts that have been called on behalf of the prosecution have been blown to pieces and, destroyed a case for them. And by the same token, I've seen defense lawyers use forensic experts in a very creative fashion to help and assist them with cross-examination, etc. So hopefully some of that will come across as I go through these slides. Okay, so there's really 4 questions that I want to get across tonight. It's, not sure how to control this. What is forensic accounting? What do forensic accountants do? Who hires forensic accountants and why? And the forensic accounting process and practice standards. Now, when I speak to you about this, although I refer to the word forensic accounting, I think a lot of the concepts I'm going to bring forth can really be applied to the forensic expert, whether it be a scientist, an engineer, any expert that you require for your case. Hopefully, a lot of the concepts come through, and it's not just limited to forensic accountants. I do a similar presentation to the university, Osgoode, and I put a lot of examples that I've come across through the years. I'm not going to ask you to figure this out given the time constraint we have, but this is essentially a case done by one of my colleagues, just to give you a sense of what we have to deal with. Transactions paper, voluminous amounts of paper, this day and age a lot of computer, electronic information. In essence, I asked the class, what is wrong with this picture? What doesn't make sense? And I give them 5 or 10 minutes to think about it, go over it, and ultimately this is a expense fraud. I have my little pointer here. And just quickly, Note to self, change batteries. 992.98, 21 cents of tax. 903 is the total, 996 is the change. And what doesn't make sense there is on a $992 transaction, 21 cents of tax doesn't make any sense, not in Canada. And the change that was received by this fraudster was actually more than what he actually paid. And on the left side, you actually have the original receipt, and what this person did is actually penciled in or with pen put in to try to get more of a claim from his receipt, expense report receipt, than he actually spent. Real life case. So what is forensic accounting? The term forensic, most of you in the room probably know already. When I say, when I told my mom I'm a forensic accountant, she immediately thought CSI. No, not that glamorous, not that interesting, somewhat interesting, pays the bills. Forensic is really, and to this day, a lot of very experienced lawyers and a lot of experienced accountants, for that matter, confuse the term forensic to think that it's something sexy, fraud. And all forensic really means is the use of analysis, in my case accounting analysis, and opinions that are suitable for evidence in a tribunal or court. You take the word forensic, throw it in front of the word accounting, and simply means the use of accounting analysis and opinions suitable for a court to assist a judge or a trier of fact with the case. And there's really four facets of forensic accounting. There's the accounting skills. There's some sort of accounting or financial problem. There's an investigative mindset. There's typically a dispute or anticipated dispute. And typically there's a fraud or illegal act that has occurred. And there's really two main forms of forensic accounting. There's the litigation support on the civil side typically, and the fraud investigations, which really span both the civil and the criminal side. I often like to, I got two young kids, so I do everything in pictures. Excuse me. Forensic accounting, I thought this best depicts what it is forensic accountants do and how it's different from your typical bookkeeper or financial accountant. On the outer shell, you have the economy, the ecosystem of business and transactions. One layer in, you have businesses that operate within that economy. One layer further in, you have business transactions. One layer further in, you have accounting and accounting processes and the records that fall out of that process. One layer in, you have GAAP, Generally Accepted Accounting Principles, and that's really the financial statements that fall out of the transactions. And right in the bullseye in the middle is the focus and deep work that we do, which is forensic accounting. It's really siphoning through all of those layers, those rings, in a very focused and deep and investigative manner to really determine what's relevant, what's reliable, to assist a trier of fact in a litigation proceeding or a fraud investigation, what it may be. And I should say, if there's any questions throughout, by all means stop me. I'm happy to answer them. This is another way to sort of look at how forensic accountants differ from your typical financial accountant or bookkeeper. I typically, and there's a big misconception. I've seen cases where defense lawyers or people trying to investigate a fraud will hire their internal financial accountant or bookkeeper to try to do the investigation, and I've seen it fall apart. Primarily because I'm on the defense side trying to poke holes in the work they've done. And financial accounts I equate to a wellness clinic. It's process completion, whether it be preparing a tax return, and this is not to minimize financial accountants because I'm one. Tax returns, do an audit, bookkeeping, prepare financial statements. On the forensic accounting side, and forensic expert for that matter, it's really an emergency ward where there's some sort of certainty of result that you're trying to achieve. And I always equate, when a client says, well, why shouldn't I just use my internal accountant to do the investigation? I said, well, you wouldn't hire your plumber to do your plastering your house. Same type of thing. Example of tasks performed by forensic accountants. I'm not going to go through each one of these bullets. A lot of them are pretty intuitive as to what it is accountants and forensic accountants do. I will highlight some of the more sort of common areas that we focus on more recently over the last decade or so. The most obvious being with the information age and a lot of information stored on PDAs, computers, iPads, iPods, voicemails being digital, cameras, computers, laptops, etc. Oftentimes forensic accountants, with the assistance of my partners, computer forensic experts, will get involved in trying to secure and safeguard records. So that's one thing that's sort of happening more and more often now that a lot of information is stored electronically. The other thing is assisting with tracing transactions and flow of funds. Oftentimes, again, not so common many years ago, but with the access to many offshore destinations for people to park their money, oftentimes we get involved in trying to trace the money and finding out where the money went, and with the assistance of counsel, trying to assist with the asset and business recovery of those assets. So those are some examples. Same with there. I'm actually going to talk a little bit later about expert witness reports and oral testimony. Jonathan touched on it, and I thought it was bang on. But that's really, at the end of the day, what our ultimate product is an opinion. There's a huge process that we go through, but experts, forensic experts, whether it be an accountant or someone else, goes through a massive process, but ultimately our product is an oral report to the court that needs to withstand cross-examination and all sorts of other tests to, I don't want to use the word convince a judge, but in essence, act as an independent and objective professional to try to assist the trier of fact. Excuse me. The next slide here, again, there's a lot of words on that screen as to the type of services that forensic accountants provide, but really, why is it that lawyers, whether it be the Crown or prosecution, whether it be a defense lawyer in defending a suspected client that's undergone fraud, why is it that they hire us? And and this is really general, it can apply to any forensic expert. Why do they hire us? One is we're independent and we're objective. We're meant to be independent and objective. That is a first thing as to why you want to hire a forensic expert. In my field, I'm an investigative and forensic accountant. I have a diploma. I hold a diploma from the University of Toronto in that area, as well as being a chartered accountant and chartered business evaluator. We actually have standard practices that we have to follow. And I'll get into it a little later real quick, but those standard practices make really, really good cross-examination for defense lawyers, because if you don't follow those standard practices, in essence, the defense lawyer will try to make your investigation out to be an offensive investigation. Why else do lawyers hire us is really to give opinion evidence as opposed to fact evidence, which I don't need to speak about. You're all the lawyers, you know the difference. But oftentimes, I've seen mistakes where lawyers, inexperienced lawyers, try to use an internal accountant to try to give opinion evidence when in fact they're really giving fact evidence. So forensic experts, opinion evidence. Skill set, we're there to give opinions, draw inferences when there's missing documents or information that the ordinary layperson cannot do, that a judge, a trier of fact, is not able to do on his or her own. That's another reason lawyers hire us. And most importantly is communication. I've seen some brilliant forensic accountants that can work wonders, can think masterfully, but they can't speak. They can't communicate to a judge in very simple terms. This is how it happened. Here's how it went. A plus B equals C. They just fumble it. So a good forensic expert has to be able to distill and communicate what it is that they're trying to tell the judge. Some examples of recent forensic engagements, and Paul, if I'm going over, just do this, or the big cane. Some recent forensic engagements. Again, I don't want to go too much into this. It's on the website. You can look at it. You can call me. I can discuss each one of these. Anton Pillar orders. That's essentially the civil equivalent of a search and seizure order. Mariva injunctions is a freeze order. I have one there, Granitile. If it's actually a case, and I apologize, I didn't bring the reference. That's actually a case I worked on. One of my partners gave evidence on that case. We were retained by the Department of Justice on a motion to overturn a previous civil judgment on grounds of perjury and fraud that a particular witness, accountant, gave evidence on in order to try to obtain damages from the government and perjure themselves. And they hired us to go in and look at the accounting documents to try to determine whether or not what the evidence he gave in court was in fact perjured based on the documents. That was a very interesting one. It's a public available case. Computer forensics and retrieval of important data. Again, very important in this day and age. Without the documents, you really don't have much. I've put in a couple of slides here. I've had an entire different presentation. If you're interested, I can pass it along, but really goes through all the different types of fraud and how financial crimes are perpetrated, all the various ways in which these things can occur. This is just a snapshot, and all it's really trying to portray or speak to you about is every fraud is different, and which is why it's important to hire a forensic expert, is because they've typically seen or should have seen a lot of these instances over the years of experience, and they're able to put sort of the pieces into place. Someone that's involved in a payroll fraud, you'd want to ask different questions, interview different people, ask for different documents in the accounting cycle than someone that's, perpetrating a purchase fraud, where the documents are completely different, the people involved in the accounting cycle are very different. So it's there to show you that there's various complex schemes. Oftentimes there's more than one person involved. There's concealment efforts, multiple transactions, multiple bank accounts, etc. Just skip ahead. This is just one slide out of a presentation I did at one of the universities on fraud schemes and how they're perpetrated and how they're concealed and various ways of detecting fraud to forensic accountants. And all I'm trying to show here is that asset misappropriations are in fact probably the highest percentage of frauds. That's physically taken assets, cash, physical assets, inventory, equipment, albeit smaller dollar amounts. Whereas fraudulent statements, like a Conrad Black or a Nortel or Bernie Ebers, etc., are probably the least common, but the ones that are most publicly exposed and the ones you hear about most in the media, and typically equate to the higher dollar amounts. And just one other slide, Snowball Effect. Why I have this here is typically, and I think every single case I've worked on, this seems to be the case, frauds start out small all the time. I've seen frauds that started out with $200 over a 10-year span, ended up being millions of dollars a year. Oftentimes, the psychological or psychology of a fraudster is, let me see if I can get away with it. Is there opportunity to take money or take something? And over time, once they decide, they see they can get away with it, the problem becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. Why I say this is because with respect to forensic investigations and forensic experts, timelines, bookends, trying to determine when the fraud occurred, when it ended, what happened in between, who was involved, is there possibly collusion. That whole investigative mindset and no rock unturned is extremely important when either retaining a forensic investigator or cross-examining one. Another quick example, I'm not going to ask you to try to figure it out. In essence, this is actually another real case. That's an Air Canada ticket. And again, I use this at the university. I have a ton of these that I go through and basically ask the class, what is unique? What is different on this airline ticket? And people look at it and stare, and I think one person got it in the last 5 years. This is, again, someone that tried to put through their airline ticket twice. The computer generates, or the Air Canada ticket print, the zeros on there have that slash through. Whereas if you look at the date, the date, the person tried to change it with their home typewriter. And the zero is different. And believe it or not, I've in fact had to hire handwriting specialists, ink specialists, type specialists for these types. They exist. If you ever have someone that you think there's a falsified invoice, or the ink is not the same as on this document as it is on the other one, there are experts. You would not believe the amount of forensic experts out there to help you try to figure this stuff out. They exist. Okay. The forensic accounting process. I don't have this up here to try to teach you how to be forensic investigators or accountants. It's really here to help you understand the process that forensic experts need to go through. And again, I think you can probably take this and genericize it to all forensic experts, but there's a process in place. And this is really more for the defense lawyers in the room, how you can poke holes in the process. I've seen many, many instances where forensic experts, forensic accountants per se, do a fantastic job with respect to their methodologies, their assumptions, cross the T's, dot the I's, but it's the process of maintaining their working papers, the process of, did you interview all of the relevant people that might help you with this investigation? How is your expert report put together? And that's ultimately where I find them, in my field at least, forensic experts fail. So when they're on that stand, a cross-examination, they may have fantastic assumptions and fantastic, corroborating this and that, the other, but there's holes in the process as to how they got there, and that's really which takes a good forensic expert to, an offensive forensic accountant, if I can use that word. So, first thing, respond quickly and objectively. Why? I was actually speaking at a course yesterday, the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, and the people speaking before me, the lecture was called "The First 48 Hours," the most crucial. That's ultimately the first 48 hours is when the fraudster gets in there, can destroy documents. People involved can try to conceal the fraud quickly. Things go missing. Other people that were not involved in the fraud inadvertently touch documents and they get tampered with, so therefore the chain of custody gets affected. So the first 40 hours is really important from an investigation point of view to A, secure the documents and to maintain the chain of custody, and most importantly from the company's perspective is to really stop the bleeding. Obtaining access to information, again, in a similar terms, securing and maintaining the chain of custody is crucial. I've seen cases where documents have gone missing. People have, for example, there was a recent case where a laptop, the suspected fraudster, was terminated or put on unpaid leave by the company, wasn't terminated, unpaid leave, and there was about a 14-day lag between when the person was on unpaid leave and when the actual laptop was secured. And throughout that intervening period, that laptop was actually loaned out as a loaner to someone else in the department. Not helpful. Distilling the data and the information. In my view, data is just data, and what forensic experts need to do is take that data and turn it into information and distinguish the difference between data and noise and try to draw the inferences between the two. Also, understanding what it is you're interpreting. For example, DOB, I think that's date of birth. That could also mean, Dwayne, Osmond, Brady. That can mean many things, and I've seen cases where people have fumbled that up. They don't ask the right questions, they don't interview the right people, they don't understand the documents, they draw inferences that are completely wrong, and on cross-examination it's a disaster. And the clarity of conclusion, I can't hammer home enough about that. Ultimately, we can be great at as accountants, we can be great at putting together our methodology and carrying on an investigation. If you can't communicate those results in a very simple, easy to understand, graphical way, the message gets lost, and as forensic experts, not very effective. Forensic accounting standard practices. The reason I put this up here is because in 2007, my body that I'm responsible for came out with a set of standard practices. And I've seen time and time again defense lawyers take these standard practices and sit there and spend hours and hours cross-examining on each one of these to say, did you do this? Did you do that? No, no, no. And it essentially minimizes the work that they've done. It's fallen below the minimum standard of care. So it's a good way, this is forensic accounting. I'm not familiar with other disciplines, but I'm sure that exists in other, forensic sciences, et cetera. It's a good way, something you should do as lawyers is go through it and sit down with your expert and ensure that they are in line with this. Although if you have a good expert, they should probably be doing that anyways. As an example, this is just one example. What happens if you determine that the information you're relying upon is false? Well, you go to the standard practices, and there are areas in the standard practice that deal with that. As forensic experts in accounting, we need to be sure that the information we are relying upon is not biased, false, unreliable, and or incomplete. By similar fashion, we need to ensure that any assumptions we rely upon and estimates are reliable and reasonable. So there's ways to go and cross-examine the forensic expert. A similar example, computer terminal in the possession of multiple people subsequent to suspect's termination of company. This is the example I just gave where the computer was not secured until 14 days after the suspect was put on unpaid leave. Well, as forensic experts, we can't prevent that, but we can certainly ensure that we take steps to, once we have the computer, that we have a chain of custody, and for that intervening period, we interview the people that had access to that computer, what did they do with it, use our computer forensic experts to determine what information and metadata was on, left, added, deleted, etc. So there's certain steps that you need to take, and the practice standards ensure that those steps are being taken by the accountant in this case. Expert testimony. Jonathan touched on this and was very complete in that our job is not to win cases. That's the lawyer's job, or to lose cases. Our job is to really be, and my mom would be proud, is to really search the truth. And we're there to provide independent assistance to the tribunal. We're there to give evidence on issues that are within our expertise. Again, I can't tell you the amount of times that I've sat there and I've seen accounting experts try to give evidence on construction financing. The first question is, have you ever given a loan, Mr. Carlucci? No. And on and on and on. We're accountants. So give evidence on issues that are within our expertise. And on the civil side, I'm not sure on the criminal side if this actually applies, but on the civil side, under the rules of civil procedure, we're actually required to sign forms that we attach and append to our reports that say exactly this. We're independent, objective. Our job is for the courts. We're given evidence in the area that we have expertise in. Never be an advocate. That's what advocates are for. And provide the tribunal with information, assumptions, and limitations. Be as transparent as possible. If your expert is not doing any of this, they're not very good. Quickly, this is based on a research paper I did 2 years ago at the University of Toronto. I investigated cases where accounting experts per se got essentially criticized by the courts, and it always boils down to the 4 or 5 different areas. Not being independent, relying on unreasonable assumptions, heavy reliance on client representations without corroborating the information that they're relying upon to draw their conclusions, flawed methodologies, and experience, providing evidence outside your field of experience. And lastly, the last 2 slides, and I apologize if I went over, factors to consider when retaining a forensic accountant, sorry. And I think every single lawyer that I work for, the first thing they tell me they do is search case law, look at the forensic accountant, the type of decisions that have been put out on them, how long have they been doing this? I don't have any gray hair, but gray hair is good in this field, in this business. I have no hair, that might work. Make sure that they have the skills to react immediately, both from a capacity point of view and from a knowledge point of view. The third one I think is very important, and very few forensic accountants I can talk about do this, but it's more than just the numbers and the technical nature of our work. It's really having common sense and having some business savvy. Every single case, or most cases I deal with, have some sort of business problem to them. Again, we're not there to solve the problem. We need to understand the problem and how to best, in the case of a financial crime, investigate the problem. Hire during the early stages of the investigation. Crucial for reasons I discussed already. The sooner you get in there, the better. Stop the bleeding, hands on all the documents, preserve them, maintain the chain of custody, etc. Expert, when they're testifying in court, ensure that they have all related documents that they require to give their opinion. And if there's any scope restriction in their work, that they clearly communicate that, both in their report and at trial. And I'm not going to talk about this one. Jonathan did a great job. Always maintain privilege over documents. The last thing you want is the other side's expert to come in and barrel through all your documents. It happens. Nothing to be ashamed of, but privilege is important. There you go. Any questions? Whether or not, if it's not tonight, feel free to call me, email me. This presentation is available, and thank you very much.
One of the things Enzo really brought out is it's not only the analysis that the expert can bring, but the ability of them to communicate and to be able to deliver the message in a very plain and simple fashion. I think he illustrated that. And I think he did it better than me, because when I introduced him, I didn't tell you that Enzo is, he's been doing this for a long time, but he's with Duff and Phelps, and it's an international group. And they're listed on the New York Stock Exchange. It's a very well-respected group. I know that you've been an expert. You've been ruled and accepted as an expert in all of the courts in Ontario, or all different levels of courts in Ontario. If you do have questions, feel free to call Enzo. I'll post his contact details on my website. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.